So that was our brief impromptu observance of Ratha Yatra. We took our Sri Ramakrishna little basket and with the beautiful artwork of Jagannath, Sri Jagannathji. So, an expression of love of the devotees for the Lord. They gather together and they pull him in a big chariot and bring him, and with great enthusiasm of love, which is our subject today. Our subject for the talk today is Swami Vivekananda's way of love. And what I wanted to do is really just share some quotes of Swami Vivekananda.
I cannot
love.
hear very well,
Why
so
don't-
if you use this, that will be okay.
Well, is that better?
Yeah.
Does that help? Do you want to sit close? Come sit. We'll bring a chair here. Whoop, careful. Just check to see that the camera is
Thank you
not
very much.
disturbed. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Naren, you can adjust the camera so that it's...
We'll still keep the mic right from?
Yeah. Okay. All right, so today I'm just going to share some quotes of Swami Vivekananda on love. That's what I always amazed by Swami Vivekananda's teachings, because we think of him as a great teacher of Vedanta and great teacher of meditation and of jnana and karma yoga, and but if we study his teachings, we find that they always circle back around to love. And if we know him, if we study his life, we see that he was, at heart, a lover. Both a lover of God and a lover of humanity. He had fallen in love with humanity. And divine, his God is all the human beings. So this is, we can see, we just look through his teachings and see where that takes us, and what kind of message we can learn from Swami Vivekananda's intense love and what an ideal he sets for us. So I'd like to start with an incident which took place in Balaram Bose's house. Swami Vivekananda had returned from America, from his first visit to America, and he was at Balaram Mandir, the home of Balaram Bose, the great householder, disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, at whose home Sri Ramakrishna went 100 times. And Swami Brahmananda left his body there, and Swami Vivekananda also spent time there, as well as Holy Mother. So Swamiji was there at Balaram Mandir. He was pacing on the veranda, and Swami Turiyananda went to see him. And Swamiji was unaware that Swami Turiyananda was there, and in Swami Turiyananda's words, I had gone to see Swamiji at Balaram Mandir and found him pacing the veranda like a caged lion. Like a caged lion pacing back and forth. And he began to hum, under his breath, the celebrated and pathetic song of Mirabai. That song where she says, "Nobody knows my sorrow," expressing her intense pangs of sorrow at the separation from Krishna. And so he began singing, humming that song, and the tears welled up in his eyes. He stopped and leaned against the balustrade and hid his face in his two palms. His voice became more distinct, and he sang, repeating several times, "Oh, nobody understands my sorrow. Nobody understands my sorrow." And again, on the one hand, Vivekananda says that love is joy, love is bliss, and true love brings joy. And yet here, this great heart of Vivekananda, who loved all beings, was suffering, feeling the suffering of others. So the path of love is both the path of great joy, and it can also be, for those who are called to it, a path of tears, to be able to love all. Because naturally, if someone we love is in misery, we also feel it, isn't it? We also feel miserable if our most beloved person is suffering. So when one's most beloved person is all beings, think of the suffering. Think of the joy and think of the suffering. So let's look a little more at what Swami Vivekananda, the lover, writes about love and says about love. First of all, how do we define love? How does Swami Vivekananda define love? And it's not what we think. When we think of love, Swami Vivekananda's definition of love he sets the bar very high. He places before us a very high ideal of love. And he presents to us three pillars of love, or three tests of love. And does what we're feeling, that which we're calling love, does it meet these three tests? Then it's real love, then it's true love. And these are the tests. What we ordinarily think of as love, mostly it's a kind of deep affection, or a romantic attachment, or even an infatuation that we call love. And Swami Vivekananda will remind us that actually what mostly we call love, and especially in this culture, what is presented so high is the romantic love, the love between the lovers, the man and woman, or for lovers, even beyond the, as Ramakrishna would say, the love of a woman for her paramour is even stronger. You know, the illicit love, that love is placed at the highest. And we'll see, does that meet Swami Vivekananda's definition of love? And then of course we even use the word love about ordinary things. I really love ice cream, or I really love my new car, We use it in an informal way. We know that that's not really love, but we have a certain attachment for that object. We have, in the language of psychology, we have cathected. There's a cathexis about an object. We have some kind of strong identification with a car. Oftentimes, people become very attached to their cars, and if the car gets a little scratch, it's like, I've been scratched. Oh my God, my car. So this is attachment. This is not love. This is attachment, and that attachment will make us suffer. Whereas true love brings bliss, until it expands into that universal love of Swami Vivekananda, when loving all beings. So Swamiji says, I'm not talking about what every one of us means by love. Little namby-pamby love is lovely. Man falls in love with woman, and woman goes to die for man. The chances are that in 5 minutes, John kicks Jane and Jane kicks John. This is materialism, and no love at all. It's based on bodies, so it's a materialism. It's only a physical attraction. If John could really love Jane, or Jane could really love John, he would be perfect that moment. Just think, if we could really love our beloved, our spouse or our lover, if we could really love with perfect love, we would be perfect that minute. Because love itself is God, says Swamiji. Love itself is God. Says Swamiji and all the prophets and world teachers. You have that love whether you know it or not. This is again, reminding us that we have that power of love within us. We are lovers. We have who we are is infinite bliss, is infinite love. The question is how to manifest it, how to realize it, how to open the floodgates of our heart and let it pour out. So here he gives these three tests of love. The first test, or the first, as he puts it, the first angle of the triangle of love is love knows no bargaining, no shopkeeping.
Yeah, three conditions.
Three conditions.
Yeah.
We're going to cover the three conditions. Yeah. Love knows no bargaining. There's no shopkeeping. Or Wherever there is any seeking for something in return, there can be no real love. It becomes a matter of mere shopkeeping, says Vivekananda. And this is actually pretty tough. We think that we love without expectation, but even in our close family relationships, where we have a very strong love, and we like to think that our love is unconditional, but still we sort of expect that I love my spouse very much, and he or she also should love me, right? There's a kind of mutual expectation. I love you and you also love me. And the only time perhaps we get a taste of that no expectation is with a newborn infant. We love our newborn child with this overflowing love that knows no bounds, and whatever the baby may do, and the baby is crying, and the baby is constantly needing to be fed and needing to be cleaned and all that, and we don't mind at all because we just love. We don't expect anything. But even that doesn't last, does it? The child starts to grow up, and then we start to have certain expectations of the child. Do your homework, help with the dishes, do your chores, all these things. So this is the thing. And the same is it applies also to our relationship with God. We say we love God, we call ourselves devotees. We also expect that, well, God should do something for us. God should get me that promotion that I want so much. If God is not giving me my promotion, well, what good is He? Lord, I prayed you so much for that promotion. Why didn't you give it to me? This is just a bargain. I'm giving you love, you should give me the promotion. So that's not real love. The genuine, the true love, the highest love is, I don't seek anything. Lord, I just want to love you for the sake of love and not for any other reason. So it's difficult. We expect that God should protect us. We're devotees, after all. And perhaps oftentimes we do feel divine protection. But then bad things also happen. Oh, God just hates me now. God has forgotten about me. This is the shopkeeping religion. So he gives an interesting example of the kind of feeling that we get in that kind of love. And he gives the example of going into natural scenery. So where we see a beautiful sunset in the mountains and the lakes and the trees and all those kind of things. And he says, when you see a beautiful scenery and fall in love with it, you do not demand anything in the way of favor from the scenery, nor does the scenery demand anything from you. Yet the vision thereof brings you to a blissful state of the mind. It tones down all the friction in your soul. It makes you calm, almost raises you for the time being beyond your mortal nature, and places you in a condition of quiet, divine ecstasy. I hope all of you have experienced that in nature. We go out and experience some beautiful scenery, and we're lifted up from the time being. We're raised up to a kind of joy, a peace that we don't ordinarily taste. This is called the nature mysticism. Certain nature mystics who knew this well and sought this. Of course, we can go beyond that. We want to go beyond that so that we can feel that at all times, whether we're in the downtown Raleigh with all the squalor, or we're in the Smoky Mountains. But that idea that we don't expect anything from that, we're not asking anything from that beautiful scenery, we are simply lifted up by it, and we attain a kind of. And so Swamiji says, this nature of real love is the first angle of our triangle. Ask not anything in return for your love. Let your position be always that of the giver. Give your love unto God, but do not ask anything in return even of Him. So he sets the bar pretty high. Let's remind ourselves, Swami Vivekananda does not say, you all are wrong. You are expecting something for your love, so your love is bad. He will never say that. He says, we do not move from error to truth, but from lower truth to higher truth. So all right, we are not yet able, perhaps, in most cases, to love without seeking anything in return. But still, we know the ideal. Let's remind ourselves of the ideal, and gradually we can practice some detachment. Try to expect less, and gradually we move from lower truth to higher truth. The second angle, the second test of love, love knows no fear. No fear. There can be no fear in love. Perfect love casteth out all fear, says Paul, I think, isn't it? St. Paul in the Bible, one of his letters, his famous letter on love. Perfect love casteth out all fear. Casts out all fear. Love conquers all fear, says Swami Vivekananda also. And you think, well, what fear is there? Oftentimes when we love somebody, there's a fear of loss. Fear of loss. We love our children, and we're afraid something may happen to them. We love our spouse, and we're afraid lest our spouse may fall in love with somebody else and leave us behind. And of course it happens from time to time. It's heartbreaking. So that fear is there. Then Swamiji says, sorry, not yet true love. If there's any fear, we have not yet attained true love. It's difficult. But let's see what he says about fear. Fear comes from the selfish idea of cutting one's self off from the universe. I am separate from the universe. That's what brings fear. The smaller and more selfish I make myself, the more is my fear. The more selfish. The more selfishness means I should have the things for me. I should have all the love. I should have all the money. And then naturally fear comes that someone will take it away from me. I will lose that which I try to, the tighter I try to hold something to me, and only to me, the more afraid I will be that it gets taken away. When we can completely let go in pure love, then then there's no fear. That selfishness is gone. Then we conquer fear. The smaller and more selfish I make myself, the more is my fear. If a person thinks he is a little nothing, fear will surely come upon him. And the less you think of yourself as an insignificant person, the less fear there will be for you. Interesting. If we might think that, well, we should be humble. I'm a nobody, I'm insignificant. Then that may also actually bring fear. That's not the true humility. The true humility, as Swami Vivekananda says, same-sightedness, samadarshitva, where I look upon all with an equal eye of love, including myself. I am not an insignificant person. So long as there's the least spark of fear in you, there can be no love there. Love and fear are incompatible. God is never to be feared by those who love him. That's another point. And especially in this country, when Swami Vivekananda was here, that was a major platform of Christian preaching. Fear God. Fear the wrath of God. God is angry, and he's angry with your sin, and he's going to cast you all into hell. So you better be good, or else there's eternal damnation for you. And describing all the horrors of hell. This was the method of Christian preaching.
Swamiji, when I was a young boy, I was going to school in Bahawalpur, which is now in Pakistan, and I was studying in a missionary school because the English started from 3rd grade instead of other schools 6th grade. So my parents said, if you want to learn English, we will send you to Church Mission School. That was the name of the school. And at the outside headmaster's door, he was Christian, Indian Christian. He said, fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. Fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. Right. That was the main thing.
Right. So Swami Vivekananda, he came to break these kinds of mistaken notions.
Yeah.
All right, we're going from lower truth to higher truth. Maybe there is a place for fear. That's the first impetus, perhaps, towards religion. Is I'm afraid, and so I turn to God, and I'm afraid of God. So, but when we know that God is love, how can there be any fear? How can we fear that reality which is infinite love, who loves us unconditionally and without any qualifications or any punishment or any of that. So there can be no fear there. So we don't have to fear God. The good news. All right, then the third test of love. He puts it this way, and it's a little bit difficult to understand exactly what he means at first. He says that love knows no rival. Love knows no rival. What does he mean? Let's read what he says about it, and we'll start to understand. And then he takes it to the highest. True love never comes until the object of our love becomes to us our highest ideal. The object of our love becomes our highest ideal. How can that be? Have I loved my family members, and how is that my highest ideal? It may be, he says, it may be that in many cases human love is misdirected and misplaced. But to the person who loves, the thing he loves is always his own highest ideal. Starting to hint at what is that highest ideal. Whom do we really love? The third, or the apex, he puts it in a different way here. He says that love loves for the sake of love itself. Even the idea of object vanishes. Love is the only form in which love is loved. This is the highest abstraction, and the same as the absolute. Okay, now he's starting to suggest that actually when we love, if it's true love, love always is, we're actually love for the sake of love. And what is that love? That love is God. Actually, we think we're loving various people, we think we're loving various things, all these things. Actually, it is all the divine shining within each person who is drawing our love. The divine shining behind the mother peeping at us through the beauty of the natural world. And we respond to that with love, with awe, with ecstasy. As the Upanishad says, the wife is not loved for the sake of the wife, but for the sake of the self, the divine, the divinity within. And the husband is not loved for the sake of the husband, but for the sake of that divinity within. Yes, so actually we are always loving God, only we don't realize it, because love is God. And even the love I have for you is not different from God. All right, he expands on this a little bit. When a person has this last and most perfect form of love, then all desires vanish. Forms and doctrines and churches drop away. Even the desire for freedom is given up. The highest love is the love that is sexless, for it is perfect unity that is expressed in the highest love, and sex differentiates bodies. It is therefore only in spirit that union is possible. Coming to union. He brings it finally to unity, to oneness. And we'll see how he points out that actually love is a reflection of unity, a reflection of oneness on the plane of duality. It is that which brings us closer together and ultimately makes us one. This is what love. Now he gives the example of an oyster. And as an oyster throws over a grain of sand, it finds in its shell the substance that turns that grain of sand into a beautiful pearl. So, a person throws out love, and it is always man's highest ideal that he loves. And the highest ideal is always selfless. So, man loves love. God is love, and we love God, or love love. We only see love. Love cannot be expressed. Love for love's sake cannot be expressed to those who have not felt it. So here he's saying, on the one hand, he's saying that the love is its own highest ideal, and if our love becomes true, then it recognizes that. It recognizes that, and it becomes overwhelming. And yet he says you can't really explain it. You have to taste it yourself and become mad. Mhm. So he sets the bar pretty high. If we look at our own lives and how much we're able to love others, then we see, well, maybe we still have a ways to go in our evolution. Swami Vivekananda acknowledges that. He doesn't deny it. He says, it is very easy to talk. From my childhood I have heard of seeing God everywhere and in everything, and then I can really enjoy the world. But as soon as I mix with the world and get a few blows from it, the idea vanishes. I am walking in the street, thinking that God is in every person, and a strong man comes along and gives me a push, and I fall flat on my face on the footpath. Then I rise up quickly with clenched fist, and the blood has rushed to my head. Everything love is forgotten. I have become mad. Instead of encountering God, I see the devil. So this happens, yes. We in our interactions with everybody, these things happen. So then what's the point? Swamiji asks, well, what's the point? Is there a point then? Yes, there's a point. We should know about the ideal, because perseverance will conquer, he says. Practice makes perfect. Nothing happens in a day. We know what the ideal is. We go on practicing. And every time we find ourselves short of the ideal, it's another opportunity to learn, to expand our hearts, to think how we might open our hearts more. So this kind of love that we've been discussing, it's clear that he's really talking about love for God. Is it possible to have that kind of love between human beings? Is it possible to love our husband or our wife with this kind of love? Swamiji says, well, maybe. Possibly you can. But it's difficult. He says, human love, we must remember, is mixed up with attributes. It is dependent too on the other's attitude. I love you and you love me. And you don't love me anymore? Well, I don't really love you anymore either. And then he says there's 3 levels of love. 3 levels. First is selfish, and that selfish love consists in the pleasure of being loved. It's nice to be loved. People love me. Oh, I enjoy that. Oh, my mother loves me, and my wife loves me, and my children love me, and that feels so good. That's a very low form of love. All right, Swamiji grants that it is love in a certain kind of sense, but it's very selfish love. It's a low love. Second, the middle kind of love is mutual love. I love you, and you love me. And most human love is like this. Let's face it. And it also ceases mutually. You don't love me anymore? Okay, I don't love you anymore either. Then true love is all giving. All giving. Whether someone loves or not, we don't even think about whether someone loves us. We're only loving. And that's the kind of love we try to give to God. Can we give this love to another person? Maybe. It is almost impossible, says Swamiji, almost impossible to love a human being like this. But it is possible so to love God. He says almost impossible. It doesn't say impossible. And I think how it becomes possible when we can love God that way, when we can have intense love for God, then there's enough love left over for everybody else. There's enough love left to love our family members that way too. When we start seeing God in our family members, then we can love them that way. He says that perfect love is very rare in human relation. For human love is almost always interdependent and mutual, as we've been discussing. But God's love is a constant stream. Nothing can hurt or disturb it. When one loves God as one's highest ideal, as no beggar, wanting nothing, not asking, I love you, so give me that promotion, wanting nothing, then is love carried to the extreme of evolution, and it becomes a great power in the universe. You would talk about the power of love. Swami Vivekananda would say that's the greatest power, the greatest motive power. We can conquer everything through love. Ordinarily we conquer. Well, love is for the weaklings. The lovers go to the wall. We have to be strong. We have to fight. fight maybe, but fight through love. We have to fight ourselves mostly. So he would write to his disciples these such inspiring messages in his letters like, love never fails, my son. Today or tomorrow or ages after, truth will conquer. Love will win the victory. Do you love your fellow beings? Where should you go to seek for God? Are not the poor, the miserable, the weak gods? Why not worship them first? Believe in the omnipotent power of love. Have you love? You are omnipotent. Are you perfectly unselfish? If so, you are irresistible. Of course, if we're perfectly unselfish, then we have no selfish desires. So, who is going to resist us? We have only noble desires, and we become irresistible. Everything will melt in the light of that infinite love. So it was really the power of that love that propelled Swami Vivekananda across the world to wake up the people slumbering in the ignorance and darkness everywhere. That intense love for humanity, that tremendous struggle that he did, love was behind it. He would say, there's an infinite, omniscient spirit behind that can do everything, break every bond, and that spirit we are, and we get that power through love. Actually, that power is always within us. But what's blocking it? Actually, we block it. Our little egos, our little self, this little me and mind that thinks itself so important, this little Swami Mahayogananda who thinks he's going to give a lecture and be somebody important. That guy is just blocking up that tremendous love which is inside of us. Let him. The Christian mystics who used to say, and Swami Vivekananda liked this, he would say the old man. They would say the old man must die, or the old woman must die. That old guy who thinks he's someone important, someone separate from God, someone who's going to rule it over other people. That guy has got to go. And then, when that guy steps aside, when that girl steps aside, then that infinite love, which is already within us, that comes forward, that comes out. We have to manifest it. It's only a question of manifesting it. So how does it, we know in our lives we constantly have friction with others. This is the test. We can say that our personal interactions are like a crucible where we test our love. You know, in the chemist's laboratory, the chemist will put various chemicals together in a crucible and heat it up and put it under pressure, and then see what comes out. So in our lives, our lives are like a crucible where we are put under tremendous heat and pressure, and then we see what comes out. Does love come out? That's the test. He goes on. Work through freedom, work through love. Love never comes until there is freedom. Freedom. There is no true love possible in the slave, he says. And then he says that we're actually all slaves. When we ourselves work for the things of the world as slaves, there can be no love in us, and our work is not true work. Yes, we're slaves as long as our work has the aim of getting more money, of protecting our own selfish interests. We're slaves. We're slaves to the things of the world. We're slaves to this world. Selfish work is slaves' work. And here is a test, another test he gives us. Every act of love brings happiness. Every act of love brings happiness. There is no act of love which does not bring peace and blessedness as its reaction. So we can ask ourselves, I've done something for someone. Have I done it out of love? If I feel miserable after doing it, then there's something wrong. I haven't done it with love. There's been some selfishness. There's been some expectation. There's been something. The true act of love brings happiness. And this is, he even reminds us that when we are able to do something with love, love will always come back to us. And same with hatred. If we hate someone, that hatred also will come back to us. It completes the circle. Whatever comes out of you must come back to you. That line in Raja Yoga, it struck me like a ton of bricks when I was, I still remember I was in the subway, going somewhere in the subway train, going to, well, I don't remember where I was going, probably to some job I had at the time, well before joining the monastery. And I was reading Raja Yoga, and I read the line, every vicious thought must rebound. Every vicious thought must rebound. Even the thought you have thought in a cave somewhere, a thought of nastiness towards someone else, will come back to you and give you some misery here. It hit me like a ton of bricks, like, oh my gosh, even a nasty thought will come back to haunt me. So it's a real something to think about. At the same time, he assures us even thoughts of love will come back to us, thoughts of unselfishness. All right. Swami Vivekananda presents the practice of religion. What is the real practice of religion? It is none other than love. And he gives this amazing exposition, a succinct gem of an exposition of what is religion. He gives many of them, but the one that I particularly love is one that is nestled in a letter written to his American sister, Mary Hale. The relationship between Swamiji and Mary Hale is always fascinating to me. It was a relationship of genuine sisterhood and brotherhood. They had this very pure fraternal love for one another, and Swamiji could unburden himself to Mary. He would write all kinds of informal things like just what's going on for the day and how his digestion is doing and what he did that morning and what he's going to do tomorrow, and he's buying a gift for her dad and don't tell him about it, but it's going to be a nice pipe that I bought for him.
Excuse me, Swamiji, did you say Sister Nivedita or what?
No, Mary Hale.
Huh?
Mary Hale. That's the
Mary,
Hale,
okay.
the Hale sisters. You know, the Hale family,
Okay.
and the Mother Church and Father Pope,
Okay.
and the four
Yeah,
sisters,
yeah.
the sisters
Yeah.
four,
Yeah.
and Mary was the closest of the four sisters.
Yeah.
And but in between all the chit chat, he would hide these gems of spiritual truth. And this is one of the very powerful ones that he wrote to her. He writes, the eternal, the infinite, the omnipresent, the omniscient is a principle, not a person. He's giving the highest Vedanta philosophy in 2 lines. The infinite, the eternal, the omniscient, the omnipresent is a principle, not a person. You and I and everyone are but embodiments of that principle. We are all embodiments of infinite consciousness, of the divine, the one infinite divine principle. We are embodiments of that principle. And the more of this infinite principle is embodied in the person, the greater is he. That's what he's always calling us. Manifest your divinity. Manifest the divinity. And the more that divinity is being manifested, the greater is a person. And then he gives a guarantee. All, in the end, will be the perfect embodiment of that. We're all destined to attain perfection. We shall become perfect. We shall be the perfect embodiment of that. And thus, all will be one, as they are now essentially. All will be one. So he goes from, he names there's a principle, one infinite principle, and we are all embodiments of that. And the more we are able to manifest it, the more we can embody that in our lives, the greater we are. And we are all destined to become perfect embodiments of that, and thus We shall all be one, as we are now in essence. And then he gives the practice. He says, this is all there is of religion. He sums it all up like this. No doctrines and dogmas, just this idea. And the practice is through this feeling of oneness that is love. That's the practice. How do we manifest this infinite principle, which is of which we are an embodiment? Through love, which is the feeling of oneness. As I mentioned before, he posits love as the manifestation of oneness in duality. That attraction which is leading back to oneness, back to unity, back to the realization that there is only the one, and we are that. So we'll have to grow in oneness, as Swami Vivekananda puts it. Do you feel for others? Do you feel for others? If you do, you are growing in oneness. He writes to his disciple, Hosea Goodwin, his stenographer. There was only one letter Swamiji wrote to him, because most of the time they were together. But there was a period when they were not together, apparently, a short period, and he wrote him this letter. And this letter was written from Switzerland, I believe. And this letter was written on the day that Swami Vivekananda came to know that one of his disciples had betrayed him. His dear disciple, Swami Kripananda, Leon Landsberg, was probably his first sannyasin disciple, at least first Western sannyasin disciple. And they lived together in New York for many, many months. And he became initiated into sannyasa and became Swami Kripananda. And then when Swamiji was in Europe, he went off his head. He lost his balance, and he went to the newspapers and concocted some kind of fanciful story about all the scandals and all the women flocking to the Swami and strange yogic practices and all that. It was one of those big spreads in the newspaper, taking up a whole page and picture, sketches and all of that. And so this Swami Vivekananda came to know about it. So he writes to Goodwin, it is unswerving love and perfect unselfishness that conquer everything. And he gives us a real challenge. We Vedantists, in every difficulty, ought to ask the subjective question, why do I see that? Why can I not conquer this with love? In every difficulty. Now we know life is full of difficulties. Your life is full of difficulty, my life is full of difficulties. That's the definition of life. Life is facing difficulties and overcoming them. That's the very nature of our life. If we think we could just stop the difficulties, life could be really smooth and nice. It's not going to happen because that's the nature of life. That there's going to be difficulties. And if we consider ourselves Vedantists, we ought to ask ourselves in every difficulty, says Swamiji, when we're facing a difficulty, we also ask ourselves, why do I see this? Why am I having this difficulty? Why can I not conquer this difficulty with love? Instead of fighting, why can I not conquer this difficulty with love? Because there's too much ego, too much selfishness. And then he reminds us, a good world, a happy world, and social progress are all terms equally intelligible with hot ice or dark light. Listen closely. He says, we think that this world ought to be good. We can make it good if we just try a little harder. We just enact the right laws, elect the right politicians, and we all just grow a little bit more in sympathy, and this world could be a heaven. It's just within reach, it seems like. We just need to fix some things and kill the bad people and put the bad people behind bars, and we could make this world good. We could make it perfect. If you think so, says Swami Vivekananda, your thinking is equivalent to hot ice or dark light. It doesn't make any sense. It's nonsense, actually. You can't make this world good. If it were good, he says, it would not be the world. And then he points out our mistake. We think, he says, the soul foolishly thinks of manifesting the infinite in finite matter. At last it finds out its error and tries to escape. This going back is the beginning of religion. Okay, at a certain point detachment comes. We realize we can't make this world perfect. We cannot do it. But what can we make perfect? We can make ourselves perfect by perfectly manifesting that infinite principle of which we are an embodiment. And that is religion, says Swami Vivekananda, going back. And its method, what's the method? You know what the method is. He's already told us so many times. Its method, destruction of self, lowercase s. Destruction of the little self. That is love. Not love for wife or child or anybody else, but love for everything else except this little self. So universal love for everything except our little self. So that's this love as the destruction of the little self. When the little self dissolves, that infinite love pours forth in abundance. It is here within us, only we're standing in the way. Can we step aside? So this, at the end of this letter to Goodwin, he writes about Kripananda. A few days ago, I felt a sudden, irresistible desire to write to Kripananda. Perhaps he was unhappy and thinking of me. So I wrote him a warm letter. Today, from the American news, I see why it was so. He'd heard about the betrayal. I sent him flowers gathered near the glaciers. Asked Miss Waldo to send him some money and plenty of love. Love never dies. The love of the Father never dies, whatever the children may do or be. He is my child. He has the same or more share in my love and health now that he is in misery. So seeing the betrayal, he recognizes that Kripananda is in misery, and he's sending more love to him. So that's the call to us also. Now here's one question. This idea, we've been talking about destroying the self through love. But is that, then should we hate ourselves? What about this idea of self-love? Is that just selfishness? Is that just narcissism? It's a kind of pop psychology. You have to love yourself before you can love anyone else. Is it true? I think there's a deep truth in it. There's a deep truth. See, if hatred in whatever form contracts the heart, how can we attain true love if we are hating one being, even if that being is ourselves? Even if we're hating only ourselves, we have no hatred for anything or anyone except ourselves, that's still hatred. That's still a constriction, a contraction. So, of course, we capitalize the S. We should love ourselves, recognizing that it's the capital S, the true self, the divine self within the Atman, that we love. And Swami Vivekananda does point this out. He says, faith in ourselves will do everything. And this is a famous quote. The old religion said that he was an atheist who did not believe in God. The new religion says that he is the atheist who does not believe in himself. But it is not selfish faith, because the Vedanta again is the doctrine of oneness. It means faith in all, because you are all. Love for yourselves means love for all. Love for animals, love for everything, for you are all one. So absolutely, we have to love ourselves, recognizing that we are not separate from the universe, not separate from others. When there is love, we cannot exclude any one person from that love, even if that person is ourselves. And it is a stumbling block. Some people have a difficulty extending their love to themselves. And it's a stumbling block in spiritual life, a stumbling block in attaining true peace and happiness in life, if we hate ourselves. So transcending our lower self doesn't mean hating ourselves. We ought to be clear about that. It is through love and love alone that we make progress. And when we loving others, that love also must extend to ourselves. And ultimately, that beautiful quote from Swamiji's poem, Song of the Free, also written to Mary Hale. Not two nor many, 'tis but one. And thus in me all me's I have. I cannot hate, I cannot shun myself from me. I can but love. Can you catch it? It's like an Upanishadic mantra. Not two nor many, 'tis but one. And thus in me all me's I have. Everybody calls himself or herself me. You call yourself me, and I call myself me. And in me, all me's are there. It's a very poetic way of putting it. Thus in me, all me's I have. I cannot hate. I cannot shun myself from me. I cannot shun myself from me. I can but love. So this is the Upanishadic Mantra, and this is actually a direct translation, I believe, of the 6th mantra of the Isha Upanishad. The Isha Upanishad, which says, Yastu sarvāni bhūtānyatman nevānupashyati sarva bhūteshu chātmanam tato na vijugupsati. This is describing the sage, the realized sage. The Upanishad says, that person who sees all beings in the self, all beings in the self, in that one self who I realize I am, I see all beings. And at the same time, I see that one self in all beings. In all beings I see the self. And that person, therefore, na vijugupsate, cannot hate. Cannot hate. Swamiji has directly translated this Upanishadic mantra in his English poem. I cannot shun myself from me. Thus in me all me's I have. I cannot hate. I cannot shun myself from me. I can but love. So I think we just touch finally on the culmination of love. When love reaches the feverish pitch, you can say, of intense love for God, it becomes an ecstasy. It becomes a madness. It becomes all-consuming. And I think we can do no better than to read from his famous letter to Francis Leggett, in which he starts by addressing Francis as frankincense, my dear frankincense. And he writes, "You will be pleased to know that I am also learning my lessons every day in patience, and above all in sympathy. I think I am slowly approaching to that state when I should be able to love the very devil himself, if there were any." And he says, at 20 years of age, I was the most unsympathetic, uncompromising fanatic. He says himself, he was a fanatic. I would not walk on the footpath on the theater side of the streets in Calcutta. The theater was considered the immoral people, where the actors were immoral people. At 33, I can live in the same house with prostitutes and never would think of saying a word of reproach to them. Is it degenerate, or is it that I am broadening out into the universal love which is the Lord himself? This is interesting. He says he can live in the same house with prostitutes. Now, he's writing this in July of 1896. In that period of December 1895 through, I'm not sure how through 1896, he was living on West 39th Street in New York. I did some research. This was well known as a red light district. There were many houses of prostitution on that street. He had rooms there, and it's very possible that in the building there were also prostitutes living. It's very possible. And here he's saying it hypothetically. Actually, he's not speaking hypothetically. Actually, he was living in an area where there were actually prostitutes living. But he wouldn't think of saying a word of reproach to them. Only love. So he goes on. Some days I get into a sort of ecstasy. I feel that I must bless everyone, everything, love and embrace everything. And I do see that evil is a delusion. When that love comes, that overwhelming love, then even evil is nothing. It's just a delusion. I am in one of these moods now, dear Francis, and am actually shedding tears of joy at the thought of you and Mrs. Leggett's love and kindness to me. So this is the kind of ecstasy that comes. He writes, I bless the day I was born. I have had so much of kindness and love here, and that love infinite that brought me into being has guarded every one of my actions, good or bad. For what am I? What was I ever but a tool in his hands, for whose service I have given up everything, my beloved ones, my joys, my life. If we think of Swamiji's life, we think, how is it? He had a lot of suffering. As a young man, his father died, and family members then took away the ancestral property, and he had to go to court, and it was terrible things, and he couldn't get a job, no one was willing to give him work. And yet he says, so much of kindness and love, and that love infinite that brought me into being has guarded every one of my actions. So when we attain that love, then all the disappointments in life, all those heartbreaks, they are washed away in that onrush of infinite love. And then God becomes our playmate. As Swami Vivekananda would take that attitude, we're just playing with the Lord, we're just playing with the Divine Mother. He is my playful darling, I am his playfellow. There is neither rhyme nor reason in the universe. He, the playful one, is playing these tears and laughters over all parts of the play. Great fun, great fun. So this kind of attitude comes when we get touch that love. I have learned a thing or two. Beyond reason and learning and talking is the feeling, the love, the beloved. I, Sake, fill up the cup and we will be mad. Yours ever in madness, Vivekananda. So,
I have a question. I'm, book letters of Swami Vivekananda. Many times he says that he was criticized and all that. So my question is that their cultural rules are made. In every culture, the rules are made. So the rules are made. Sannyasi should not be with women. This and that. Okay, now sannyasi like him, he's one with the woman or man or whatever it is. But he is of that level. But the people those are looking from the outside, their mind is not so pure. So that's what the gossip comes to. So what is the way out? There's no way out. You see?
what? But when you've reached that level of love, what does it matter?
Yeah, to him it doesn't matter. What I'm saying, those who see from the outside and making these kind of criticism, this kind of comments and all that. So it is the burden on them. But with the Swamiji, so what I'm saying, how could they, if the Swami is, Swami is so pure, Swami is so, full of love and all that, how come those people do criticize? They don't get that. Why they don't feel that?
They're still on the path. They haven't come that far yet.
Yeah.
They'll get there. We'll all get there.
I mean, his own disciple, sannyasi, is still not looking the right way, So that's kind of always create a question in my mind, is how you deal, I mean, he knows.
Well, what does he say?
Yeah.
We ought to ask ourselves,
Yeah.
why can I not solve this with love? Why can I not address this with love?
So that's what we always say, if somebody misunderstands you, then it is them. My conscience free, pure or whatever it is. So actually, you still see that criticism with love.
Swami Vivekananda was loath to defend himself. He was ready to defend others.
Yes.
You criticize someone else,
Yeah.
he will defend. But you criticize him, he won't defend himself.
There's no need also, because
No.
people will say or think what they want. So then what is need of doing that, So very practical, very nice. Thank you, Swami. This is really nice.
So he says, yes, this idea of the madness of love. In inspired talks in Thousand Island Park, he's telling his disciples, never ask that foolish question, what good will it do to the world? Let the world go. Love and ask nothing. Love and look for nothing further. Love and forget all the isms. Drink the cup of love and become mad. Say thine, O thine, forever, O Lord, and plunge in, forgetting all else. The very idea of God is love. And this is beautiful. He says, seeing a cat loving her kittens, stand and pray. God has become manifest there. Literally believe this. Repeat, I am thine, for we can see God everywhere. Do not seek for him, just see him. See a cat loving its kittens. God is manifest there. Everywhere when we see love, when we see compassion, the God is being manifest there. We also are manifesting God as we are able to love. And when we get that kind of love, then this circles back to the beginning of our readings when we saw how Swami Vivekananda felt the misery of the sufferings of humanity, and he was overcome with misery and suffering precisely because of that love. That intense love impelled him to try to wake us all up out of our slumber of ignorance and darkness and misery. And he writes to Sister Nivedita and to all of us, one idea that I see clear as daylight is that misery is caused by ignorance and nothing else. Who will give the world light? Sacrifice in the past has been the law. It will be, alas, for ages to come. The earth's bravest and best will have to sacrifice themselves for the good of many, for the welfare of all. Buddhas by the hundred are necessary with eternal love and pity. So he's calling on us, he's calling on the lovers, that yes, if you want to be a lover, you have to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice yourself for the good of all, for the welfare of all. When we attain that love, we get that call to sacrifice. Why? To alleviate the suffering. Because our own beloved is suffering in the bodies of millions of people stuck in ignorance of their true nature. What the world wants is character. The world is in need of those whose life is one burning love, selfless. That love will make every word tell like thunderbolt. Bold words and bolder deeds are what we want. Awake, awake, great ones. The world is burning with misery. Can you sleep? Let us call and call to the sleeping gods awake, till the God within answers to the call. So this is Swamiji's call. His expanded heart, feeling the pain of the world, is calling on us, all of us, to awaken. He concludes by saying, what more is in life? What greater work? The details come to me as I go. I never make plans. Plans grow and work themselves. I only say, awake, awake. So, in sum today we touched on, through some choice readings from Swami Vivekananda, different aspects of love. We touched on the three tests, or the three pillars of love. Love knows no bargaining. Love knows no fear, and love knows no rival, or love is always the highest ideal. Love for the sake of love alone. And we saw Vivekananda's tremendous love for Ananda on love.
Swami, I see three new faces. Maybe they have come here before, but I have not seen them. Would you introduce us?
Harish is not new to us. He's already well known to us.
So, okay, you can introduce.
Shall I start?
Okay, I have one.
we can chant Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Yeah.
So I can
Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.
You start always with your speeches.
Oh, no, well, that's the start. Here's the beginning, now it's over. That's good enough for today. And we had a kind of a fun start with our Ratha Yatra improvisation. May we feel that we're playing with, carrying the Lord always in the chariot.
Yeah, Untitled